ready to confront pure terror? Turn on the lights, but they won't save you. We're opening the doors to a world where darkness doesn't just blind, it consumes the soul. Here, in the darkest corners of the night, even your breath can become a harbinger of nightmares. Question everything you knew about safety and comfort. Are you prepared to hear eerie whispers from nowhere invade your mind and torment every thought? Leave your fears at the door, because what we show you will make them burst forth. Are you ready to journey into the dark corners where every sound and shadow harbors an unknown danger? Sit tight and brace yourself, for the night is just beginning, and its horror could become your eternal companion. It's time to step into a world with no way back, where darkness will be your only guide.
Helen was an ordinary woman living in a small suburban neighborhood. Her days were filled with the familiar rhythms of life that many took for granted. Each morning began with the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the curtains of her modest bedroom. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air as she prepared her breakfast, a simple routine that provided her with comfort. Helen worked as a librarian at the local library, a job she loved for its quietude and the world of stories that surrounded her. The library was a haven of sorts, filled with the whispers of pages turning and the rustle of readers lost in their thoughts. Her home was adorned with the little things that made it her own. Family photographs lined the walls, capturing moments of joy and laughter. Houseplants thrived in the corners, each leaf a testament to her nurturing spirit. In the evenings, she would often curl up on her favorite couch with a book in hand, the outside world fading away as she immersed herself in fantastical tales. Helen cherished her friends and family, often hosting small gatherings filled with laughter and warmth. She was known for her kindness and gentle nature, traits that endeared her to those around her. However, one fateful day, everything changed. It started innocently enough as she was preparing for work. As she rolled up her sleeves to wash her hands, she noticed a small mark on her forearm. At first glance, it appeared as nothing more than an odd blemish, a peculiar spot that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The mark was faint and almost innocuous, resembling an abstract shape that Helen could not quite place. Despite its unusual appearance, she dismissed it as a harmless skin irritation. Perhaps it was a result of the weather or an allergic reaction to something she had touched. She shrugged it off, convinced it would fade away as quickly as it had appeared. After all, she had more pressing matters to attend to, such as her work and the upcoming weekend plans with friends. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, the mark refused to disappear. Instead, it began to subtly change. The pattern deepened, becoming more defined. Helen found herself glancing at it more often, a nagging feeling growing in the pit of her stomach. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that it was merely a figment of her imagination. But the mark was persistent, lingering in her thoughts even as she tried to focus on her daily tasks. With each passing day, Helen felt a strange connection to the mark, as if it held secrets that were just beyond her understanding. She would catch herself staring at it during quiet moments, an unsettling sensation creeping over her. Yet, she resolutely pushed those feelings aside. Life continued, and she was determined not to let a simple mark disrupt her routine. As she navigated the challenges of her daily life, the mark became a silent companion, an ever-present reminder of something unknown. Helen continued to go about her ordinary existence, fully aware of the strange symbol on her skin, but unwilling to confront its significance. Her world remained intact, but deep down, she sensed that this was just the beginning of an uncharted journey that would soon unravel the very fabric of her reality. As days turned into weeks, the mark on Helen's forearm began its slow but relentless expansion. What had once been a faint and innocuous symbol now transformed into a prominent sigil, its intricate design weaving itself across her skin like a dark tapestry. The lines of the mark twisted and curled, reminiscent of ancient runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Each day, she would wake to find the pattern sprawling further, creeping up her arm and inching toward her shoulder. The sensation was both alarming and mesmerizing, as if the symbol were drawing her in with its allure while simultaneously repelling her with its sinister energy. With the mark's growth came a palpable shift in Helen's thoughts. The clarity that once defined her mind began to dull, replaced by an unsettling fog that clouded her judgment. She found herself fixating on the mark, unable to shake the feeling that it was more than mere skin deep. It felt like a tether to an otherworldly presence, a connection to something dark that lurked just beyond her perception. Her dreams took on a new quality, becoming vivid and nightmarish. Night after night, she was haunted by visions of a shadowy figure that hovered at the edges of her consciousness, a silhouette that seemed to beckon her into the depths of despair. In these dreams, the figure was indistinct yet undeniably menacing, its presence a constant reminder of the encroaching darkness that seeped into her reality. Helen would awaken drenched in sweat, her heart racing as she struggled to recall the specifics of the nightmare, only to be left with the lingering impression of fear. The dreams grew more intense, each one revealing fragments of a world shrouded in shadows, where the line between her waking life and the realm of nightmares blurred. During her waking hours, Helen began to feel an insidious influence taking hold. It was subtle at first, a creeping coldness that settled in her bones. She would catch herself staring vacantly into space, lost in thoughts that were not her own. The mark seemed to whisper to her, urging her to embrace a darkness she could not comprehend. The sensation of being watched became overwhelming, as if unseen eyes were scrutinizing her every move. This feeling intensified, wrapping around her like a shroud, leaving her with an ever-present sense of vulnerability. The changes in Helen's behavior were alarming. Once a warm and approachable woman, she found herself withdrawing from friends and family. Conversations that once brought her joy now felt burdensome. She became increasingly irritable, prone to sudden outbursts that bewildered those around her. It was as if the mark were not only altering her skin, but also reshaping her very essence. Helen was losing herself to an influence she could not fight. Each glance at the mark sent shivers down her spine, a reminder of the ancient demon that had chosen her as a vessel. As the mark continued its inexorable journey across her body, Helen's fear morphed into a desperate need for understanding. She sought answers, delving into books about symbols and ancient lore, hoping to unravel the mystery of the sigil that now consumed her thoughts. But with each revelation came more questions, and the weight of the mark pressed down on her like a darkening cloud. The connection to the sinister force grew stronger, and the battle for her identity became more urgent. Each day felt like a race against time as the mark's expansion mirrored the growing darkness within her. Helen was caught in a struggle that transcended mere physical transformation. It was a fight for her soul against an ancient evil that crept ever closer to claiming her entirely. As the mark continued its relentless expansion across Helen's skin, the changes in her behavior became increasingly pronounced. The once vibrant and warm-hearted woman began to exhibit a coldness that unsettled those around her. Friends who had cherished her laughter and kindness could now only observe as she became more distant and detached. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly were replaced with awkward silences, as if a wall had risen between Helen and the world she once inhabited. The warmth in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a glassy stare that suggested she was lost in thoughts that were no longer her own. Helen often caught herself staring blankly at her hands, entranced by the intricate patterns of the mark that seemed to pulse with an eerie life. It was as if the sigil held a magnetic pull, drawing her focus and attention away from reality. The mark became an obsession, a dark fascination that consumed her thoughts. She spent countless hours examining it in the mirror, tracing the lines with trembling fingers as though seeking answers etched within its depths. Each touch sent a shiver through her body, a reminder of the sinister energy that coursed through her veins. Compounding this unsettling transformation were the compulsions that began to surface. Helen found herself performing strange, ritualistic actions without understanding why. It started with small things, arranging objects in specific patterns or repeating phrases under her breath. These actions felt foreign, yet strangely comforting, as if they were somehow linked to the mark's dark influence. The compulsion grew stronger, leading her to engage in elaborate rituals that felt both necessary and inexplicable. Each time she gave in to these urges, a fleeting sense of relief washed over her, followed by an overwhelming wave of guilt and confusion. The mark's presence transformed her routine into a series of rituals she could not control. Helen would wake in the dead of night, compelled to draw symbols on scraps of paper, her hand moving with a speed and precision that astonished her. It was as if a force beyond her comprehension guided her movements. These scribbled designs bore a striking resemblance to the sigil on her skin, as if she were attempting to decode the very essence of the dark power that had taken root within her. Fear gnawed at Helen's insides as she realized that these compulsions were not merely symptoms of stress or anxiety. They were manifestations of the malevolent entity that sought to claim her. The more she tried to resist, the stronger the pull became. Each day, the mark seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, a sinister reminder of the ancient demon's presence. It whispered secrets she could not grasp, urging her to surrender fully to its will. With every passing moment, Helen's fear deepened. She sensed that this transformation was about more than just her behavior. It was an invasion of her very soul. The mark was not simply a physical affliction, but a doorway for something dark and powerful to seep into her being. Her identity, once vibrant and distinct, began to dissolve as the demon's essence intertwined with her own. The boundaries of self blurred, and she could feel her will slipping away, replaced by an overwhelming compulsion to serve the darkness that now thrived within her. Helen's struggle became a desperate battle against an unseen enemy, as each day unfolded like a new chapter in a nightmare from which she could not awaken. The mark had become a curse, a reminder of the ancient evil that sought to consume her entirely. As she faced the encroaching darkness, she knew that the fight for her identity had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. As the mark on Helen's skin reached its final stages of transformation, the ancient demon's presence intensified, preparing to cross over into the physical realm through her body. The intricate sigil, once a mere blemish, had now become a sinister portal, pulsating with dark energy that eroded Helen's sense of self. Each day, she felt the encroaching tide of malevolence seep deeper into her being, the transformation not just physical, but a profound spiritual invasion. The demon's essence was insidious, weaving itself into the very fabric of Helen's identity. The vibrant memories of her past, the laughter with friends, the comfort of family gatherings began to fade like old photographs left in the sun. This erosion of her identity was gradual yet relentless, as if the demon were methodically dismantling her very essence. Helen would catch fleeting glimpses of the woman she used to be, only to have those reflections swallowed by the overwhelming presence of the dark entity that claimed her. As the mark expanded, so too did the demon's power. Helen's thoughts became increasingly chaotic, filled with foreign ideas that she could not comprehend. The once clear voice in her head was now drowned out by whispers of despair and darkness, urging her to surrender to the malevolent force. With every passing moment, she felt herself slipping away, replaced by an alien essence that sought to dominate her will. The final stage of the mark's transformation loomed ominously, a moment when the demon would fully emerge, and Helen feared that when this happened, she would cease to exist as she knew herself. In the midst of this turmoil, Helen fought desperately to maintain her sanity and sense of self. She searched for answers, scouring ancient texts and seeking counsel from those who might understand the dark forces at play. The struggle was one of sheer will as she grappled with the reality of her situation. Each day felt like a battle against the encroaching darkness, a fight not just for her identity, but for her very soul. Helen's desperate fight became a series of small victories and crushing defeats. She would have moments of clarity where she felt a flicker of her old self, only to have those moments extinguished by the overwhelming power of the demon. It became a haunting dance of resistance as she attempted to reclaim the woman she once was, while the dark entity loomed ever closer, its grip tightening around her heart and mind. The mark pulsed with a life of its own, a grim reminder of the ancient evil that was preparing for its emergence. Helen knew that the moment of complete possession was imminent, and the stakes could not be higher. It was a race against time, a desperate plea for autonomy in the face of encroaching darkness. Each day became a testament to her resolve as she fought to hold on to the remnants of her identity, even as the shadow of the demon threatened to engulf her entirely. Helen stood in her dimly lit bedroom, the air thick with a palpable tension that pressed against her chest like a heavy weight. The mark on her forearm pulsed ominously, a dark sigil that had transformed her life into a waking nightmare. As she gazed into the mirror, she could see the creeping shadows coiling around her reflection, an undeniable reminder of the demon that sought to claim her. The whispers in her mind grew louder, urging her to surrender, promising power and freedom from the torment that had become her existence. But Helen could not yield. She was determined to fight for her soul, even if it meant confronting the very darkness that sought to consume her. With a deep breath, she focused her mind, recalling the fragments of knowledge she had gathered from her desperate search for answers. Ancient texts spoke of rituals, of binding spells that could seal the portal the mark had become. She gathered candles, herbs, and salt elements of protection that she hoped would fortify her against the impending onslaught. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls, flickering like her resolve, but she steadied herself, knowing that this was her last chance. As she began to set the circle, the air shifted. A chill swept through the room, and the shadows deepened, swirling around her like a malevolent fog. She could feel the demon's presence growing stronger, pulsating with dark energy, struggling to break free from the confines of her body. Helen's heart raced as she recited the incantations she had memorized, her voice trembling but fierce. She could feel the power of the words as they left her lips, a shield against the encroaching darkness. But the demon was relentless. Every word she spoke seemed to fuel its rage, and suddenly, the room erupted into chaos. The shadows coalesced, forming a twisted, grotesque figure that loomed before her, a manifestation of her deepest fears. Its eyes burned with an insatiable hunger, its voice a cacophony of whispers that echoed in her mind, taunting her with promises of power and despair. "You cannot fight me, Helen. I am a part of you now. You will never be free." The demon's presence surged, pushing against her will, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Helen staggered back, but she quickly recalled the warmth of her friend's laughter, the joy of simple moments that had defined her life. "No," she shouted, her voice rising above the din. "I am not yours to claim. I will not let you take me." With renewed determination, she reached for the salt, pouring a protective ring around her, bolstering her defenses against the dark entity. The demon roared in fury, its form flickering and distorting as it struggled against the boundaries she had created. Helen could feel the heat of its anger radiating toward her, a tangible force that threatened to overwhelm her. She pressed on, her voice steady as she recited the binding spell, each word a shield against the chaos that surrounded her. The power of her conviction resonated in the air, creating a barrier that pushed back against the darkness. But the demon was cunning. It whispered lies and fears into her mind, dredging up memories of self-doubt and shame. "You are weak, Helen. Look at what you have become. You think you can resist me? I will give you strength beyond your wildest dreams." The temptation was intoxicating, and for a fleeting moment she felt the allure of surrender. But she shook her head violently, banishing the thoughts that sought to ensnare her. I am strong. I am more than you could ever be. With each declaration of her identity, the mark on her forearm burned fiercely, as if acknowledging her defiance. The sigil writhed, its dark power clashing against her will. The very essence of the demon clawed at her, seeking to undermine her resolve, but Helen stood firm, her heart pounding with the rhythm of battle. She felt the warmth of her spirit rising, igniting a fire within her that pushed back against the cold darkness. As the demon writhed and howled, Helen could see the cracks forming in its form, the power of her words breaking apart the illusion it had woven around her. "You are nothing," she declared, her voice ringing clear and true. "You will not take me." The shadows recoiled, and for the first time, Helen felt a sense of hope flicker within her. Each word she spoke became a weapon, a light piercing through the darkness that threatened to engulf her. The battle raged on, a fierce clash of wills that echoed through the confines of her mind and soul. The demon fought with ferocity, but Helen's determination burned brighter. She summoned every ounce of strength and conviction she possessed, channeling it into the binding spell that had become her last hope. The mark on her skin glowed with an intense light, illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows that had once felt insurmountable. With one final surge of energy, she shouted the final incantation, her voice resounding like thunder. The power of her declaration reverberated through the air, creating shockwaves that shattered the demon's hold on her. The figure convulsed, its shape twisting and distorting as it let out a final anguished scream, a sound that echoed in the depths of her mind. And then, silence. Helen collapsed to her knees, the weight of the battle leaving her breathless. The mark on her arm faded, the sinister sigil losing its grip on her skin. She felt the remnants of darkness retreating, the malevolent presence that had once consumed her dissipating into nothingness. As she looked around her, she saw the shadows receding, the light flooding back into the room. Tears streamed down her face as the realization washed over her she had fought and won. The battle for her soul had been fierce, but she had emerged victorious. She was Helen, a woman of strength and resilience, and she would not be defined by the darkness that had sought to claim her. With newfound clarity, she vowed to reclaim her life, knowing that the scars of this battle would forever remind her of the strength she possessed within. Helen awoke in the early morning light, the soft rays filtering through her bedroom window. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the darkness that had consumed her for so long now dissipated. She stared at her forearm, the mark that had once been a harbinger of doom now faded to nothing more than a memory. Relief washed over her, a sense of victory that felt almost surreal. She had fought the demon and emerged victorious, reclaiming her identity from the clutches of darkness. In the days that followed, Helen began to rebuild her life. The world outside her window seemed brighter, the colors more vivid, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted back into place. She reconnected with her friends and family, laughter returning to her home like a long-lost friend. Helen found solace in the simple joys of life: morning coffee, the smell of fresh books at the library, and the warmth of companionship. She embraced her second chance with gratitude, cherishing each moment as a reminder of her resilience. However, as the weeks passed, subtle changes began to stir beneath the surface. Helen noticed fleeting shadows at the edges of her vision, a sense of unease that occasionally crept back into her mind. It was as if the demon, though banished, had left an echo of its presence behind. She dismissed it as a remnant of the trauma she had endured, a psychological scar that would take time to heal. Yet, the whispers returned at night, soft and insidious, reminding her of the power she had once possessed. Late one evening, as Helen sat in her favorite chair, a book resting in her lap, she felt a chill run down her spine. It was a familiar sensation, one she thought she had left behind. The shadows in the corners of the room began to stretch and twist, coalescing into a figure that seemed to shimmer with dark energy. Panic surged within her, but she quickly steadied her breath, reminding herself of what she had overcome. But then, the figure began to speak, its voice a haunting echo of the demon she had defeated. "You think you have won, Helen, but the darkness never truly leaves. It simply waits for the opportune moment to return." Before she could react, the figure lunged toward her, and in a blinding flash, Helen felt the mark reappear on her forearm, glowing with the same sinister energy it had once radiated. Her heart raced as the realization set in the battle was far from over. The demon had not been vanquished. It had merely retreated, biding its time for a moment of weakness. As the shadows enveloped her, Helen understood that her true struggle was just beginning. The fight for her soul had not concluded. It was an ongoing battle against the darkness that would forever seek to reclaim her. The light she had fought so hard to protect flickered precariously, and she knew that she must remain vigilant, for the shadows were always lurking, waiting for the moment she might falter. Weeks turned into months, and the world around Helen resumed its familiar rhythms. She returned to the library, her sanctuary, where the scent of aged paper and ink offered a comforting embrace. Yet the echoes of her harrowing struggle lingered, casting a shadow over her newfound peace. The mark on her forearm, once a pulsating reminder of the demon's presence, faded from vibrant darkness to a mere scar, yet its memory remained etched in her mind. Despite her victories, Helen could not shake the lingering unease that clung to her like a second skin. She often found herself staring into mirrors, half expecting the malevolent figure to manifest behind her, the whispers of the demon curling around her thoughts like smoke. The shadows in her home, once innocent and mundane, now seemed to shift with a life of their own, twisting into shapes that flickered at the edges of her vision. On particularly quiet nights, when the house was steeped in silence, she could feel it again, the chilling presence that had once threatened to consume her. It was subtle, just a breath against her skin, but the sensation sent shivers down her spine. Was it her imagination, or had the darkness truly returned to haunt her? As Helen navigated her days, she found herself drawn to the dark corners of the library, searching through ancient tomes that spoke of curses and demons. There was a compulsion within her, a need to understand the forces that had invaded her life. Each page turned was a reminder of the precarious balance between light and dark, and the ever-present threat of the darkness resurfacing. One fateful evening, as a storm rumbled outside, she stumbled upon a passage that chilled her to the bone. It spoke of ancient sigils, dormant, yet waiting for the right moment to awaken. The ink seemed to pulse as she read, echoing the rhythm of her heart. Helen's breath caught in her throat as realization dawned she might have defeated the demon, but the darkness had merely retreated, lying in wait, biding its time for a moment of weakness. The shadows deepened around her, and she felt a cold gust sweep through the library, flickering the candlelight. In that instant, she understood the war was far from over. The demon's influence lingered, a dark specter lurking just beyond the veil of her consciousness, ready to reclaim what it had lost. And as the storm raged outside, Helen braced herself for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that the darkness was patient, and it would return when she least expected it.